I am Monica Nainkin, if you need to know my last name. But I am the creator and founder of Obsidian Aesthetic. It is an inclusive, intersectional platform for artists of color to share, promote, create, produce, collaborate, and have all their work there for social change. That's what we're doing here today. So yeah. This is my business partner. This is Abigail Cervantes, and she's the founder of Brown Girl Club, and I'll let her speak a little bit about that.
I'm Abby, short for Abigail. I'm the founder of Brown Girl Club. It is a collective that I founded in Brooklyn, and I've been running it for about a year and a half. And so what Brown Girl Club is, it is a group of women of color, and what we do is provide a safe space for other like-minded women who want to talk about intersectional conversations that come from a gender and race narrative. So that's kind of how Monica and I have met.
Yes.
And ever since I started Brown Girl Club, we have been kind of collaborating with each other, trying to bring both our perspectives and narratives to kind of meet each other in the middle, and bring these identity talk series where we focus on culture and expanding on that.
Yes, so all of our talks are different in format, they're different in topic, they go over a range of topics. Today we're going to enter the world of fantasies via cartoons, comics, illustrations with our wonderful artists up here. I will introduce them and then I'll have them maybe say a little bit about their work and maybe their favorite song right now that they're jamming to, just because I need some new music. So I'm really doing this for me. So I will start with Hat right here.
Hey everybody, I am Hav O. I am a Brooklyn and New York native. My work encompasses topics of surrealism, horror, race, and identity. So most of the time I always have a black woman at the forefront of my stories or my illustrations. Favorite song right now, I guess there's something new that just came out with Anderson .Paak and Kindred.
Oh, yes, that's a good one.
So that one.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to spin that.
All right, my name is Christine Rye. I am an artist and an illustrator. My most prominent work is my comic series called Yeah, It's Chill, following a caricature of me who's hyper anxious and kind of intense. And yeah, all of my work is pretty relatable, short form web comics, and then I also do editorial illustrations for news stories and stuff. And I've been really, really into Young Thug's EP. It's so good. And also Soulja Boy's first album is amazing and underrated.
I gotta take a look back. I gotta take a look back.
Okay. Can I top that off?
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can and you will.
You will.
So my name is Dr. Kaylin Pickens-Rich. I plan on getting a PhD. I'm actually currently going to Pratt Institute, and as you can see, I just got my new merge line started of Pratt Institute. It's my parody comic of the school. I do the newspaper comics for it, and I'm working with my department right now doing comics for them. And my main character that I started when I was 6 years old, I've been drawing the same thing ever since. And with that character, Dill, there became a whole world of Dill. So I have his comics. Then I have another comic called Dining with Dana, which is also a webcomic and a blog about this girl, this really heavyset goth girl, who blogs about people who are underrepresented in alternative subculture. So there's that. And my favorite song right now, I'll have to say that I've been listening to a lot of the Social Network soundtrack because The Social Network is my favorite movie.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes. I have to read it. See, look, I got 3 different recommendations. I love that. Well, that's amazing. Thank you guys for being here and spending your time to give your expertise about your work and identity. So we are going to be talking for the next 45 minutes to an hour, just engaging them with some questions that I shared beforehand, and then after that we will open it up to the audience to ask them questions regarding their work, maybe their practice in terms of how they got where they are today. These are some really dope people. If you don't already follow them on social media, you probably should, because their work is amazing, and I'm a fan, obviously. But yeah, so let's get started. So I think I'm gonna start with my first question, and we're just gonna talk about things as they are presently. Do you guys have any comics or cartoons that you're watching right now? And could you just share a little bit about why you're watching it? And does it appeal to the work that you're doing currently? Whoever.
Y'all are. So I obviously I like Adventure Time. But I tend to watch a lot of the same cartoons, honestly, that I sort of grew up with. Because I'm from Paris, France, my grandmother she was in Pennsylvania, and me and my brother, whenever we would go to the States to visit, which was really once every several years, we would always watch Nickelodeon. So I still watch a lot of Nickelodeon cartoons, so like Ren and Stimpy, SpongeBob, Cat Dog, Angry Beavers. Like that's stuff that is not really, it's not contemporary, but it's stuff that I grew up with and that inspired my work so much, especially the goofy aspect of it. And I still rewatch those cartoons.
I'm not watching anything currently, but I think it was like maybe a month or two ago, I was catching up on Voltron on Netflix. And apparently, but basically Voltron this version of Voltron is a remake of the older series they did back in the 80s. But this one is really nuanced to where like it's more inclusive, and they changed some of the characters around. So like the princess is now a brown-skinned woman. They have an openly gay character now. So it's like a lot of different elements thrown into it. And it's about like these 5 people coming together, making a giant robot, and they're saving the galaxy. And it's like really cool. And they get into these plots where it kind of gets out of the combat and more into like the inner workings of like politics between different races and how we can all make peace to stop, all the animosity going on in the world. And it's really cool. So you guys should check it out.
Okay.
Yeah. Voltron.
I also sometimes occasionally rewatch 90s cartoons, and my style in the characters that I make are kind of close to like Powerpuff Girls, like very circular around, like strong black lines. And I'm also watching right now BoJack Horseman. I really like how it represents just like mental illness. It's really good. It's lacking in representation, but the showrunner has been talking about like wanting to do better and is like slowly getting better. So, but I really like how they represent different mental illnesses. I also started watching Steven Universe. So good. Love Steven Universe. And
okay, I'm glad we got some fans. That's what we're talking about.
And Avatar: The Last Airbender, I started rewatching it again because they're doing a series, right, in Netflix?
Yeah, live action one.
Yeah.
R.I.P. But we'll see. But that's dope. I think all those are really, really awesome cartoons. I feel like I jumped the gun a little bit there. I didn't really explain where we're even working from. You know what I mean? So let me just give you a brief context about like cartoons, illustrations, comics. I'll just read a couple things for you guys. So illustrations have been around forever. We know that. People like to cite cave paintings as like one of the first like illustration comics and things like that. But the most modern iteration of what we see happened in the 1700s. And those were like political cartoons, a lot of illustrations to go along with text and reading. And then we have the rise of Walt Disney, who makes kind of cartoons and illustrations in the 1900s, really early, 1923, I believe, where he kind of makes that a more sensationalized form of TV and entertainment. So before it was kind of used for like political propaganda, a lot of teaching kids how to speak language in terms of like how do you identify the things you say visually. And also, there's one more thing. Oh, magazines. So a lot of illustrations were placed with magazines just to give, of course, readers more context, because back then illiteracy was very rampant. But now we know cartoons as to be kind of this more entertainment form thing, but we have cartoonists and illustrators who are revamping how we see cartoons today in order to make it more inclusive and more intersectional. So I'm sorry I did not give you guys that context beforehand. but we have amazing people who are going to speak on the work even more. So with that, I'm going to move into so the cartoons that you guys have mentioned before. How has these cartoons influenced or impact the way that you create work now? I know you mentioned your work, both of you guys mentioned your work being influenced from the 90s cartoons we've seen then. Can you speak a little bit more about that? More like details about how the style influenced, maybe caricature, anything that would explain your influence.
Well, the thing is, because I started when I was 6, so I was really young, I was inspired by the world. But I started drawing, I got fixated on this one character that I had invented, and it was the only thing I would draw. I would not draw anything else. And I guess it sort of grew from there. I was actually discouraged from drawing him. My teachers were saying, "Oh, your child needs to branch out," to my mom. And I was upset about it, and she showed me the work of Charles Schulz, and she said, "Look, he made a career off of drawing the same thing all the time and using the same characters," and that really inspired me, and that still inspires me to continue what I do.
Yeah, Schultz definitely inspired my work too, and like Calvin and Hobbes. I love like the shorter, or just like any Sunday newspaper comics. I love like short form comics, and I love how those were always like kind-hearted, like not mean-spirited. So all of my work is kind of like kind-hearted, not mean-spirited. Like friendship is like a big part of it. I just like, because I remember reading Sunday comics with my family, like, and I don't know, I just like felt good and warm. So I kind of just want my work to feel warm. So yeah.
For me, I guess total opposite. I watch things that are like violent, like Dragon Ball. I was watching like people shoot energy out of their hands and other people shooting energy at them. So I was inspired by like Dragon Ball. There was a Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon back in the 90s that was really popular. Jaleel White was the voice of Sonic the Hedgehog back then. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of video game stuff, so like Mario and everything like that. And then as an adult, what I really got into was the Gorillaz. Jamie Hewlett, who also illustrated Tank Girl back in the 80s. So all of those kind of mesh into where I stand now in terms of my style or the general inspirations. And a lot of people now have been telling me that it reminds them of like classic Nicktoons, so like Ah Real Monsters and Rugrats. So you know, it's kind of a mesh and amalgam of all those things.
Awesome, so dope. I think you guys all really brought up a great point in the sense that cartoon, I feel like cartoon gets a bad rep because it's supposed to be this like kiddie form of entertainment, but as we're seeing, it follows us throughout our entire lives. It's a form of media that can be used dangerously if we allow it to, and it can be used positively. So that's really dope to see that kind of track from your childhood to your adulthood, which is awesome. My next question for you guys. So, all of you guys have comics that kind of fill in a space that you felt was missing from what's the mainstream comic world is now, or the cartoon world. Can we talk about more about how your work fills that space, and what you saw missing and what you would like to see in the future?
So in America, we were just talking about this earlier, in America, the main comic theme or genre is superheroes. And I feel like we're oversaturated with it now. They're cool. Like, I love the Avengers, I love Batman and Spider-Man, all those guys, but like, let's make room for other characters, other genres, other styles of storytelling. So I really love the idea of like the Scott Pilgrims of the world and Fiona Staples' Saga. So I try to fill in that contemporary space where we can still tell those like superpowered and fantasy stories, but in a different light. So like my character, one of my comics, Epic Ethel, her whole thing is about fighting gentrification. She's a girl from Brooklyn, and like all her and her friends, they all have powers, but it's not like, oh, we gotta save the world, we gotta do this. It's all about like trying to work on the community and building up the Black community, because if you don't help yourself, how are you going to help the world? How are you going to help everyone else? So I kind of try to like fill in the alternative niches that we don't commonly see in like mainstream comics.
And my work is really relatable, and in like a relatable webcomic space, it's really white, and I don't know, I just felt like in media in general, like the stories that are centered are predominantly white people's stories, because they're the ones who like get to be able to tell the stories, and like that's what we see and like internalize that that's like the important story. So I kind of just wanted to create a character who was a woman of color going through things that everyone goes through, but like there's also other stuff that happens to us too. So I just wanted to include like all of that in the work that I make, because I feel like whenever there is diversity, it's not accurate representation, because the person of color always plays like a role that the show creator thinks they should play, and not like as a fully formed human. So that's why, like a main reason why I make my work, because I want to show like we can be the main character, we can like be a fully formed human, we can find love, and like people love us, and I don't know, I just felt like that's lacking in media.
So my work comes from a central universe of the Dill universe and the Dills, but I have multiple comics that have just started to evolve from that same universe at different points in my life. So when I had initially created Dill, Dill became just this black and white character, and his race, his ethnicity or whatever, was never really defined. And that was important to me because it was sort of questioning, what is the default? Why do people see this particular character as being white, even though he's never been colored in? So that's the main theme in my work that's always followed me. But then I, at some point, went to programming school, and it was called École Galandeau, School 42. And I developed a comic there because out of this one character that I already had, because there were no visuals, and programmers are not very visual, so I created something out of that, and then did these like comic classes and stuff. It was really fun. And after that, when I left, there was a character that actually is really important to me now, which is the character Dana, because in the alternative scene there are not that many black people that are represented, because they're there, but there are not that many people that are shown or represented, especially in the goth scene. And so I felt like I needed a sort of a bigger character and a more confident character, and that's just how she that's how I manifested her, because I was young at that point, and I think I was looking, I wanted somebody to look up to, so I created that character. And then the stuff that I do for my school now with Quack, it sort of emerged with just all the illustrations with the school, etc. So each comic has been a part of, like, played a part in my life, and it just came about organically. But it was always to fill in something that I needed to have filled in. So that's why I continue to make this stuff.
Oh, that's really awesome. Sorry, just taking in all of that knowledge. Yeah, I'm sorry. Because, there shouldn't be gaps, and you shouldn't have to kind of like figure out where you can, be comfortable and how to express yourself within a space in a safe manner. But the fact that you guys have done that and will continue to do it makes me hopeful. So thank you. So yeah. So my next question, I'm gonna ask the audience this, but this is for you guys. How many of you guys feel that art can impact social change? Okay, dope. I've asked that question before. Not that many people. I know one person. And I'll take all the answering. Thank you, Maury. I've asked that question before, and I haven't always gotten like a very majority response. So thank you for recognizing social activism and social change that could come from art because it's beautiful. You know, it's something that people think should be consumed. But as you can see, people are doing the work to make spaces for themselves and for people who will come after them in order to, you know, create actual social change in the physical space, not only in the digital realm. But so with that being said, I wanted to know, how do you guys bring yourselves as artists to your practice in order to advocate and speak for other people? Is that a hard thing you have to do? Do you sometimes feel like it's a burden? Or is it just a part of the work that you do every day?
Well, like I was kind of explaining before, it just comes naturally. Personally, I feel like if there's just something that I need to say or something that I see other people want to say but are not saying, I just do it. It's not really, I don't really pinpoint anything and think, like consciously try to, well, I mean, it's kind of, I do want to change things, but it's just things that organically come to me that I want to change, and I just produce work in the hopes that, you know, maybe they'll, at least people will have a voice. So I just take in what I hear, and then I just make stuff according to that.
Yeah, let me define, just be a little bit more clear. I don't want to feel like I am accusing you guys at all of, you know, not being activists in your artistic practice, but I feel like sometimes it falls on artists of color to kind of pick up that, like, you know, pick up that baton to say, okay, well, I'm going to be the one that speaks about women's issues, or I'm going to be the one that speaks about racial issues, or I'm going to be the one that speaks about sexual orientation, where white artists don't really have to do that. You know what I mean? They can come and say, well, that is a circle and that's abstract and that's my work and that's all that it has to be. But I feel like critics and ourselves kind of place this responsibility on ourselves to advocate for everyone else. And, you know, I think it is the rent that we pay to live on this earth, but some people don't. And that's still valid and very real. It doesn't change the work that you're doing, but I think the intention is important. But yeah, I don't know. So I don't want to feel like I'm like, are you an activist? Like, no. If you're not, that's totally fine. I choose art as my medium for activism. So I just want to know how other people feel. Because sometimes I don't want to create work because I feel like I have to say a bigger story. So yeah, sorry.
No, it's cool. I just feel like when I have to say something, I just plain out say it. And it just coincidental. I mean, it happens to be things that people need a voice for. And I have nothing to lose. So I'm like, I'm just gonna do this. And yeah, I mean, in a sense, I'd see why people would see it as a burden, but because it just is something that's genuinely coming out of you, it's almost like you have no other choice but to do it. So you're kind of putting that on yourself, but it's a good thing because this is what you need to, like, you feel like you need to do this and you need to get this out there.
It's like Nina Simone said in this one interview, I'm paraphrasing so don't take it from me, but she said something along the lines of, like, as artists, we have an obligation to reflect our times. So whatever we're doing, it has to have some inclination to what's going on in our communities, in our world, in our space. So for me, my thing is, and my fight, the fight I choose, is gentrification. So I grew up in New York, I grew up in Brooklyn, and like everywhere I go, things have changed in ways that, and I'm not against change, but things have changed in ways that are detrimental to the people who lived in that community for years. I remember when they constructed the Barclays Center, they implemented eminent domain, which is when a corporation has enough money, they can buy you out. And there's one woman who lived over in that area. She tried to stay as long as possible, but they eventually kicked her out, and they forced her to take the money. And it's things like that. It's just like, it doesn't sit right with me. Just because you have money doesn't mean you can do whatever. Just because you have money doesn't mean you can just put 15 coffee shops and cafes on the corner. Like right on my corner, there used to be a church there, and now there's like this apartment building with the fancy little like voice bell, and then there's a cafe, and like in the store, in that cafe, like the sandwich is $15. I can go up the street to the bodega and get bacon, egg, and cheese for $4. You know what I'm saying? It's like things like that. $3. it's things like that are just weird to me. So for me, gentrification is something I definitely want to talk about and inform people about, and how it does affect people negatively. So that's why Epic Ethel exists, and that's why I'm constantly talking about, you know, we shouldn't support certain types of businesses because those businesses end up kicking us out and outpricing us. So, I mean, yeah, it's just, not that I actively think about it, it just comes out because I just feel that rage sometimes when I just see something pop up and it's like, oh, why is this cafe here when it could have been a bookstore or something? You know, like, we keep getting these useless things in these neighborhoods. Like, how many more, like, specialty quinoa, puppy treat stores do we need? You know what I'm saying? Like, let's have something educational. Let's build more community centers. Let's do something that actually benefits us, not just as Black people, but as a whole. Like, that's all. That's where I come from.
Yeah, I think most art in general is just political because an artist is making it, and people are political. And if you decide not to engage in politics, that just means that you have the privilege to not engage in politics. So like, everything just is political in general. So, and my character is like clearly brown. So like my skin color in the comics just like makes it a political art form in general. So I think some of my posts I do definitely make like activist type work when I like really want to say something, but I also like don't like being the ambassador for all like Guyanese people. And I like did a comic about that because I don't know, it's like, why should I have that responsibility, you know? So there was an interview that Tiffany Haddish did recently where she was like, I didn't go to school for that. Like someone was asking her about representation in Hollywood, and she was just like, I can tell you how to construct a joke, but like the systematic issues you can ask someone else. And now that's kind of just been like my kind of viewpoint of it. I do what I do, and I speak on things that I'm informed on, and then the things that I'm not informed on, I just don't relay an opinion on it because I like there's someone else that's better at doing that than me. So that's kind of how I see my art. And I also think that there should be space for people of color to just like do fun things. Like a lot of my comics are about like fashion and shoes and like my eyebrows and stuff because like there should be space for that. Like we shouldn't be on all the time and like feel heavy all the time, you know? So yeah.
Can I ask a quick counter question?
Yeah.
So in regards to what you said, how do you take it when people try to come at you with that, you have to be doing this, you need to be doing this? Because I'm sure like people try to attack both of you sometimes where it's just like, okay, you're Black, you're brown, you should be doing this. So how do you handle situations like that?
So if I feel like someone is being just mean-spirited or not coming at me, like, right, I just don't respond. It's like if it's online, like if it's in, no one in person has ever done that to me, questioned me, but if it's online, and it happens usually with like teenage white boys ask me things, and I just don't engage with them because it's like you're not like if you're coming to me in order to like I'm not your teacher, but if you're coming to me and you just generally don't understand and like you want me to help you and like you want me to help you learn something, that I can like point you to resources. But if someone's like accusing me of not making art that's politically, I don't know, like strong enough, I don't engage because that's like my energy should be going to people who like get what I'm doing because there's enough people who get what I'm doing. So
That's actually a very interesting question because on all of my comics I actually impersonate my characters. So though I show my face on my Instagram, I don't pose as an author in all of the other ones. And so people tend to see me as a white guy because the paper is white. Like I've had this happen multiple times. And especially when I was in programming school, they all thought I was a boy. And they'd see me in real life, they're like, wait, you're the one that does the comics, you're a girl? I was like, yeah. So that happens a lot, actually. And people, they think by default, you know, it's the first thing. And people of any color, any age, anywhere, anyway, because this is what you see all the time. And you don't realize how much that actually affects you and how you sort of get these preconceptions.
Thank you. That was my next question. We're on the same collective energy right now. I love it.
I'm going to go a little bit off script. So we all live in this digital age. All of us have a digital platform where we use our voices and we interact with our so I can say, and I'm sure Manu can say a lot about the specific demographic that follows us. And so my question to you guys is about your specific, because we were talking about user interaction with our followers. So tell us about your followers, if there is a specific type of demographic, and maybe the difference in how they communicate with you.
I can go first. Because I've just recently, the whole thing.
Sorry, girl. The internet is a wild place.
The internet is a wild place. Okay, so I did, I've been practicing portraits lately, and I did a portrait of Anita Hill and Christine Blasey Ford, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, and I got a lot of support from it, but I also got like people, boys, just not, just like being really, really mean and like not getting any, and like they didn't have any information proper, like they just were just like spreading disinformation and like coming at me and questioning me. But like most of my followers are women. Instagram can like breaks down the demographics, so I'm 86% people who identify as female, and race-wise, it's pretty diverse. Like my followers are pretty diverse. And they're all like, they get it, like they're all really supportive. They usually find me through other avenues. Like if I'm in an article, they like see that they like my stuff and then they come and follow me, or if someone reposts me. So like they already like what I'm doing. But sometimes I come up on the Explore page and then I have people like coming to respond to me. So yeah, like it's always boys, and they always send like really just like mean, terrible things. So what I've been doing lately and what I did yesterday was I've been messaging their moms, because moms are bad at hiding on the internet.
They are.
And it's been great. I've gotten a couple of these dudes, their Instagram accounts have just been taken away. Because like, they just are so terrible. Like, there's this one person who told me that like I should get murdered, and he turned out to be a 13-year-old boy. So I sent it to his mom, and his mom was like, "I'm so sorry. I had no idea."
Who raised you? Right.
Yeah. So yeah, but like everyone else has been just like really, really nice. So I just engage with people who like get it, and who don't get it, I tell their moms, because they are usually children.
The internet is so annoying.
That is actually hilarious.
So I have multiple demographics. I'll say for my character, Dana is besides Pratt has a very, obviously it's Pratt students. That's a very specific one, but Dana also tends to attract, because she looks like this big sister figure. She tends to attract young black girls who are usually a little too afraid to express themselves. And the way I know this is just usually if people recognize me, or if I'm at conventions or something, they recognize Dana. And a lot of times there are these young black girls that come up to me and they're like, oh, this really makes me feel better about myself, etc. So her demographic is very specific. I'd say Dill's is a little wider than hers, because he's not, he's not colored in. He's like a kind of more of a newspaper look to him. So he attracts also people who are a little bit older too. No, but Dana's demographic is the most specific.
I was really surprised when I found out what my demographic was. Most of my demographic are like older women. Yeah, like mid-20s to mid-30s. And
That's older.
Yeah. Wait. I mean, compared to
Who are you trying to say? How old? Who is the demographic that you want really?
What I mean is like comparatively to like other shows, like Steven Universe or anybody like that, or compared to their demographics where it's younger girls, like I'm surprised that I have older women. That's very specific.
Right.
And
Like
most people-
adult women.
Yeah. Well, adult women. Sorry. Yeah, adult women.
We're teasing.
Okay. You got me. So like keeps growing, and most people are from Brooklyn, which is also interesting. But I guess it makes sense because my stuff is very like Brooklyn based or Brooklyn like centered. So I try to. I don't know. I don't do anything specific to keep them engaged. It's just the stuff I put out they gravitate to because they're like, oh, you're drawing things that are not sexualizing women. You're not doing anything that's stereotypical. Because none of my characters, a lot of men on the internet who are artists, they usually draw like, and when I was younger, I used to do it too. But they usually draw women who are like scantily clad with giant boobs and butts and very suggestive poses and things like that. And I'm not into that. It's weird to me because that's just for the instant gratification. And what I want from my art and what I want from people who view my art is for them to take something out of it besides, oh, it looks cool. I've gotten people that said that seeing Epic Ethel in that empowerment, like I used to have her fighting like hipster white people. And she's like shooting flames and stuff. And they're like, yo, that's really cool, like to see a black woman doing this sort of thing. Or like other people, I also draw like really creepy looking stuff. You've seen it. And
the one with the eyes on her skin, I
Yeah.
was like, what is going on over here?
yeah, so like I love the fact that people are like, oh my god, it makes me itch and enables my trypophobia. And I didn't even know what that was until someone said it. It's a fear of like holes and dots. So I'm like, oh, let me just keep doing that. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's
That's
cool.
interesting. Can I ask you a very specific question?
Okay.
I feel like I will ask both of you because you create your comic that reflects you. It's like a smaller you, but you guys kind of create comics that don't look like you and are kind of like, I create so and so. I create this comic that is a black woman, but I am not a black woman. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So how do you do that? And how do you do it well? Is my question.
So really quick, someone hit me up one time and thought that I was a woman because I don't have my face on my art Instagram.
Mhm.
So it was just really weird. Like this guy was coming on to me, and I was like, "Whoa, hey man, I don't ride down that street.
Okay.
It's totally fine if you do. Yeah. I just was never good at drawing myself, and I don't like drawing myself. So I usually just have every idea or every concept represented through whatever character I'm drawing.
Interesting. Okay.
Um,
I don't know if you have an answer.
None of my characters look like me. Like I don't draw myself. It feels too awkward. My characters feel more like real. Well, I'm gonna sound crazy if I say it. They feel real, but yeah, they just feel like I just know that they just feel like people I know really well. It's more like pieces of me at specific times. Because all of them are created at different moments in my life, so it's these weird instances is basically what they are.
Okay. That's interesting. I just wanted to know, just because I will be the person to admit I thought you were a woman when I hit you up first for this, and I was like, he's not.
Yeah, because I was like, you sure you want me on this? This is geared towards
And
women of color, not men.
But I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
So,
I'm glad I'm here too.
yep, we're having a good time. So, let's move on to our next question. So, let's talk about your professional experience. How has your professional experience differed from maybe people you know or people you don't know that you've seen, or I don't know, people that you look up to? Have you seen there's a difference in your professional experience? Is probably the question I should ask before.
Define professional,
Hmm.
because I'm still a student. So I'm like,
Ooh, interesting.
I would say being professional would be if you are carrying yourself in a certain manner that you're able to first generate profit from what you make, from what you create, and putting yourself in spaces where it's not just, hey, mom, I drew this. You're like going to conventions, you're going to meetups, you're linking, collaborating with other artists. So I feel like that's professional too.
You're
Okay.
definitely a
Thank
professional.
you
Yeah.
for saying all of that. That's exactly what I mean. So, yeah, like,
okay.
I mean, your work has been featured in magazines. People know you as.
I mean,
a
if you
cartoonist.
define it in that way, sure. I'm just curious because people have their different versions of professional. Like for some people, professional is did you publish 5 books yet? You know what I mean?
Mm,
So,
right.
how it
Okay, well
differs.
then let me change my question. Then, would you consider yourself a professional cartoonist or a professional artist that does this for a living?
Sure. I mean, I'm sure you guys would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
how it differs from other people.
Have you seen any differences? I don't want to assume that
Each
you have.
person's, especially with comics, just each person's totally different
Yeah.
in the way that they work. That I feel like I don't know if I could compare really.
Interesting.
Yeah, everyone that I know, like everyone's path has just been different, and I think that's kind of like art in general. It's just, at least for like my art friends, everyone's come at it differently. So
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, to kind of echo off of that, everyone has a different hustle. We were just talking earlier, like I have a friend who just does conventions. I have other friends who just sell at markets or they do those group shows. For me, it's kind of like wanting to present in gallery spaces and museums, so everyone has like a different way of going about what they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an arts administrator. I say I'm an arts administrator before I'm an artist because I like to organize artists before I actually create art. So to me, there's like a very clear path of where I'm going. I know that this is an entry level position and that this will give me, you know, profit money and an opportunity to level up. I don't know. I guess I assumed it was the same way, but it seems like it's not. Maybe can you talk about your journey then to how you got to where you are now?
I guess maybe the reason why it's so different is because I feel like comics, it's really solitary art. They, each person sort of has to take their individual path. Well, it's a bit hard to say sort of what got you there, but I guess I could put it this way, which is that going to programming school at 42 and actually for the first time creating something that everyone was reading really gave me the confidence to do more of that and actually build people to like build this sort of following.
Yeah.
You understand?
I came into an art career kind of not randomly because like you have to do things deliberately, but like I was a project manager before I did this, and I've always like been creative and really missed doing creative things. And I come from a family of business owners, so I was like, the hustle was kind of like in me, like the immigrant hustle like rubbed off on me. So I started a publishing company. You guys got the books, and I kind of just wanted to like learn the ins and outs of publishing. So I self-published the book, and I also illustrated the book to kind of like learn everything. Realized hated publishing in general, but I really liked illustrating and like drawing and creating things on my own. So as I was like working on doing distribution for this book, I was still a project manager part-time and started this comic on the side because I was like procrastinating and like anxious. So I just like drew me just like anxious and over-caffeinated, and that became the comics. And the comics just kind of took on their own. I did a 100-day project just to like keep myself accountable. So I made 100 comics, and like over the course of the 100 days, I got like 10,000 followers, and I was like, oh, this is a lot of people that are like into my stuff. It's dope. I can continue doing this, and then from there I've gotten other jobs. So I now just do art full time, and a lot of it is from people who see my comics or people who have worked with me through other art projects before. So that's how I kind of came into doing this.
I actually want to say real quick, like shout out to people who are independent because that's a really hard hustle. So can we get a round of applause for that real quick? Because when you think about comics, you're like, oh, someone just did that and blah. You got to think about characters. You have to think about their backstories, what you're writing, the script, everything, even illustrating. It takes a lot of time. So like that in and of itself is just amazing to me to see people who are independent by themselves and not on like a huge team at like Marvel or something. You know? What was the question again?
Can you speak more about how you got to where you are?
Oh, right, yeah.
In terms of, I mean, you can define this in terms of following, maybe your professional experience. Yeah, I don't know.
So drawing's been kind of a thing my entire life, ever since I was a toddler. I used to draw in composition books all the time. And in like middle school and high school, me and like other friends would just draw on these, and like I had this one friend, one of my best friends in elementary school. We would draw like this Dragon Ball Z fan comic.
Yes, I sold mine for $1 each.
And like each night, one of us would take it home and like finish the story off on each other. And I don't know, like I never thought about it as a full career when I was a kid, because it was like, that's not taught in a black household. That's not taught in a Caribbean household or West Indian household. So for me, it was like, oh, I might as well be a doctor or something. At one point I was like, oh, I'm gonna be a football player to impress my dad or whatever. But then I realized like, I'm really good at this. People like what I do. People are interested, so I decided to do it full time as a career. And for like the last 10 years, it's kind of just been this steady growth of me creating these characters and this massive universe that I'm going to be putting out within the next few years. And yeah, it's just fun to see and experiment with certain things, because a lot of my characters, believe it or not, some of them were actually white before. I had this really weird thing with myself in high school where I didn't like being black and I didn't like being dark skinned. Yeah, internalized racism. And I had this one character, Chuck was his name, the whitest name. And it was really like popular at the time, like 2008, and like I had a decent following. Most of them were like white kids on the internet, like how you have some white kids on the internet following you. And then once I decided, I was like, whoa, wait, this doesn't feel right. And I like kind of started internalizing and thinking about things, and like I need to draw characters that look like me. So I practice and practice and practice, because I used to be really bad at drawing women. So now that's all I draw. And I'd probably bother some people like, why don't you draw men? Why don't you draw white people? I'm like, nah, I'm gonna draw black women. And yeah, that's just kind of led me to where I am now, where it's just like, I feel comfortable in this space. Yeah.
That's dope. Thank you.
On the subject of professionalism, you guys are all independent artists, not represented by anyone. So how do you feel about representation? Is that something that you guys would like for your characters to eventually? Is that like the end goal, or are you not about that? You know what commercialization of these characters is the result of. It does result in massive amounts of profit. But is profit your goal, or is it just self-representation, self-determination, self-made?
I felt a lightning bolt just now strike through me, because like I always talk about this. Sasha knows. Hi Sasha, that's my girlfriend. Being independent is the most important thing that I think any artist should do, whether it's with illustration, music, or anything. Like if you look at Chance the Rapper, he's totally independent. He owns all his music. So if like one day he has something on Apple and Apple's like, we're taking it down, he'd be like, whatever, I own it. I can put it somewhere else. So being an independent artist is important to the fact of always having control over your property. Because there's this guy, I was just talking about this guy who created this series called Watchmen, and DC now has that, and they completely own it. They tricked him into like losing his rights, and now he's lost all his children that he's created for like the last few decades, and they're gone out of his hand. He can't do anything now. His hands are tied legally, can't do anything. And that's horrible. Like imagine creating your characters all this time, and then you get a deal with like Marvel and Nickelodeon and Disney, and then one day they're like, hey, actually, they trick you and like, hey, we're gonna take these and run with them and turn them into something else. You'd be devastated. So I don't wanna have that feeling when I'm making Epic Ethel or my other characters. There are ways, I know it can be seen as difficult, but there are ways to supplement yourself. We have the Freelancers Union. There's a lot of places to network around here with different organizations such as yours, Black Comics Collective, the Schomburg, they do things dealing with illustration. There's plenty of things, plenty of resources. So I say if you want to go independent, stay independent. I'm not against people wanting to work in corporations, but if you want to do your own thing and keep your characters the way they are and they don't turn different shades of colors, because look at what happened. I'm sorry. Look what happened. All y'all, have any of y'all seen Avatar: The Last Airbender?
Yes.
The movie with M. Night Shyamalan?
M. Night Shyamalan
That was horrible.
He destroyed that thing. First of all the characters were turned white. Well, some of them. The Fire Nation was Indian for some reason. And then
I've never seen it.
yeah, it was just like a weird mesh of things. And then the main character, whose name is Aang, they changed it to Aang. So it's just like, you never watched the source material, and I don't know where the creators were on that, but it's like, you need to stay on it.
Yeah.
A good example, just want to finish up. A good example was Brian, I can't remember his name, Brian O'Malley, the guy who created Scott Pilgrim.
Oh, yes.
He was on that project. He still owned his characters, and that movie is probably one of the best and most accurate comic book movies ever. And people love it because he stayed on it and he owns the rights. So that's all I got.
Yeah.
Don't feel bad if you say, I want to be represented.
Well, I do have a book agent. So I do have like representation that way, but all of my characters that I make, every deal that I make, it's never art for hire. It's always a licensing deal, and I always own the rights to the work that I make. So if I am like selling the work, I own the rights to the character, and like they can't change the character. So I don't know, because people gotta eat. You gotta like make money too.
Yeah. Rent is due the first of every month.
Yeah.
In this city, so.
But yeah, I do like to just like retain the rights to the character, but in the partnerships that I have made with other people who like want to work with me, they have always kind of aligned with my like what my vision is. So I've been lucky that I've been able to turn away people who don't align with what I want to do. Like this tabloid wanted to use one of my comics recently to like explain. It was a very misogynistic article about how women like over exaggerate, and I was like, that's not the point of anything that I make.
Yeah.
So yeah, I always kind of just like to retain that. So like if I do get represented or if I make my character into something else, like I know that the people that I choose to work with get where I'm coming from. So yeah, that's how kind of where I come from.
Yeah, I'm the independent thing. Like, hey, I'm not against making money. Like, I love making money, but at the same time, I need my characters to. My characters are so specific that if somebody else took them, it would not. They would obviously. I would be like, that's obviously mine. So they're everything that I personally have. They're everything that I have as a creator. Like these characters are literally my world. So being independent is very important. I don't think I could work with somebody having a colorist or having I want to do all that stuff myself and just be able to own everything. And like you were talking about Chance the Rapper, there's that sense of control ensures that no one really is going to take your stuff, because that's a constant fear that I think every artist has at some point, whether you're independent or not.
Yes, thank you for saying all of that. Checking my time. Okay. So I'm gonna ask my last question. Cool. The last two questions. Are you excited for the future of cartoons and illustrations? Why?
Yeah. It's the why that got me.
Explain.
Yeah, because there's so many different. We can create anything now. Anybody can create anything in this world. You know, you can just start an Instagram and make your own webcomic. There's just endless amounts of work. Yeah, the market is maybe oversaturated, but the good thing is now that you never know who's going to blow up or whatever. But I think it's great. I think it's a great moment in history.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, we're at a great point in terms of art. Like you said, anybody can do anything now. We have so many tools between social media and then a lot of the free programs out now. I think Toon Boom or some other animation program was released last year for free, and anyone can download it and mess with it. but we've got a great opportunity of representation now from things like Voltron. There's another cartoon, She-Ra, that's coming out, stars a woman. Even outside of cartoons, you have Doctor Who now that has a female doctor, which was a great episode. If you guys haven't seen that, hey. So I think we're at a great point. The only thing I fear is that, well, not necessarily fear, it's just the anxiousness of people trying to fight against that. Even though I feel like the demographic of people that are angry or small is still a lot when you might post something and it's like all these 13-year-old boys coming at you or whatever the case may be. So, yeah, I'm excited.
It's true that's been a problem for, I think there's an actress in Star Wars, I forgot who.
Yeah.
Who got bullied off of Instagram.
I forgot
just
her
for
name.
being a woman. So,
Anna Diop.
I can't remember.
It's like ANADIOP.
Yeah, she, so it is a good and also a bad point because it's true that as a creator you can get harassed to a point where you just don't want to show your work. But I guess the upside is that there are different ways, like we still have access to pen and paper. It's ridiculously cheap compared to before. So there's still ways to create. But yeah, the internet is both good and bad.
Yeah.
So.
But I mean, I like that there are less gatekeepers now. Like for me, I couldn't have the career that I have right now if it was even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, like the programs that I use are free, like Instagram's free, like people find me. So I wouldn't have been able to like have that, and I'm now getting more success just from like mainstream outlets, I feel like, because now diverse stories are taken more seriously. So people are like, oh, people are into this, let's listen to everyone who looks like her too, you know. So, and I feel like this couldn't have happened even like 5 years ago.
That's why we're here.
Yeah.
I'm guessing. Yeah.
I have a question actually, and this is something I thought about and talked about before. So now that we're in this huge boom of diversity and inclusion, how do you, and you guys can talk about it too, how do you guys feel about when a corporation or a company will do something but it seems very insincere?
So those Pepsi ads.
That or
Nike ad.
Right,
Yeah,
the Nike
that.
ad.
But-
Girl Day Barbie ad, Mattel.
Oh.
Yeah.
oh wow. So going back to Voltron, which is still a great show, it's been on for 6 seasons now. They're really short seasons, like 13 episodes. Recently, in the latest season, one of the main characters, Shiro, sorry for spoiler alerts, but I want to talk about this. The main character, Shiro, is now apparently gay out of the blue. They never had any indication to it before. They never had any hints or anything that made it so that he was represented in his demographic. So all of a sudden now he's got a husband and we're supposed to care about the husband and all this stuff, and it's just really weird, and it felt like they were just checking boxes. So how do you guys feel about that when a company or corporation does that, even though they might try to just still represent whatever demographic they're trying to reach?
Well, it's super annoying.
Yeah.
I think Riz Ahmed maybe spoke about this like yesterday or 2 days. I think it was him. Where he said that there's a difference between diversity and representation. Like diversity, you're just like throwing in a character and like you think that that's gonna appease people who look like the character, but it's not, because they need to like have an accurate, like it needs to make sense.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So it's super annoying, and it doesn't like count. Like what are you? I don't know. Like what are you doing? You know.
I feel like that happens a lot though with the LGBTQ group in general. I feel like people just left and right are like, okay, this character's gonna be trans one season to the next, just because they feel like they can. I don't know. It's gotten popular to do now. And stuff.
Yeah, I would say inclusion, or like the essence of inclusion, like things, they're taking those things, like the buzzwords, and trying to like tokenize them in a way to
Yeah.
get us on board, you know, and they're realizing that the way they operated before is not going to cut it this time. So they're like, okay, cool, we'll just throw in this guy who is now gay and has a whole, you know, life, and like that doesn't make any sense. That you just got here. How do you have a whole life? but I don't know. It's I'm like, we're in a world of fantasy. Like, how did you just come out of nowhere? But it can happen because it's the world of fantasy. You know what I mean? It's supposed to be grounded in something that's not really reality because anything can happen. But we take a lot of the things that happen in reality to the cartoon world. So, you know, the tokenistic behavior, the very transactional behavior that's like, I see that you can make me profit, so come and join me for this time being. I feel like in terms of distinguishing cartoons or art or, you know, companies, organizations that do that, you can kind of tell in the way that they interact with the audience afterwards. What's your follow-up? Yeah, you have a trans character, but how are you making trans lives better in the United States? And if I can't see any physical profit outside of you just throwing money at them, then I know you fake. And I know not to support you anymore. I mean, because I am a black woman, I know people ain't for me, especially organizations and corporations. So I always do have this kind of hesitancy to interact with corporations in a way that's supposed to feed me and my family, you know? So I try to make sure that I'm not interacting with capitalism in ways I don't have to.
It's really interesting that you asked that question because I have read a couple of articles on why the sales of Marvel have been down recently, or not recently, like within this past year or so. And a lot of people reading the responses to this question of why sales have gone down so much have blamed it on diversity. And it's not because they're saying, oh, we're gonna inject this narrative into these characters or this fantasy world that's already been developed for years and years and years, and then all of a sudden this person has a husband, or all of a sudden like they're gay and have this and that. It's not necessarily because diversity in itself is making these sales go down. It's exactly that. It's these big corporations that have commercialized our identities and have basically said, okay, we have these characters that have been working for us and that have profited based on the storyline that we have already made for them, and now we're going to change their storyline. We're going to add to their storyline. We're going to build a life for them that doesn't really make sense. And it's not diversity itself that is bringing these sales down. It's the fact that you're manipulating these characters to really tell a story that our culture wants to hear, but we want to hear it in a very different way. We want to see ourselves represented in a very authentic way from the ground up, and not just like we're just gonna inject an identity card in there and we're just gonna check up this box and be like, okay, there's your diversity, and now let's bring up sales. No, it actually counterbalanced that and brought sales down because it didn't resonate well, not just with white audiences, but with people who are into comics in general, and just how you tell a story to begin with.
I think it's also really simple. It's like we just want comics with people that look like us. It doesn't matter what happens in the comic or what they do, as long as it's a story and the person happens to be similar to you or whatever, or possess traits that you have, instead of being the same cookie cutter that we always see. Because people who are basically can represent, can feel themselves represented in sort of mainstream stuff. Like they don't think about, oh, this movie was bad, so that means that it's going to reflect on me all of a sudden. You know, we just like good stuff, bad stuff, or whatever. It doesn't really matter as long as we just have people that are authentically look like us. I feel like it's a really simple thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, to even kind of like, you know, finish the question up, so we can ask our audience members if they have any way to respond. But we can tell we're not dumb. We're not dumb. Like, I can tell if you spent 2 hours on that character. I watch a lot of cartoons, sorry, but I can tell if you.
But you apologizing for that.
I'm just saying, you know, I gotta be productive. I can't just be watching. I'm telling on myself right now, so sorry. But I can tell if you spent 2 hours on a character or if you brought this to a team. You know what I mean? I can see in the way that you took care of the character and like introduce their story, because it is storytelling, and you don't just say, okay, I was, you know, once upon a time I was crossing the street and now I'm gay and I have a husband. Like, what? No, that's not how that works. I can tell if you put the effort to actually include and to like connect this person, these characters, to the people around in the story. So I can tell if things are fully fleshed out or not. Yeah. So now we're gonna open it up to the audience. If you guys have any questions, want to respond to anything that the artists have said, you totally can. I am going to have the artists maybe shout out their social media, things that they are working on right now, as we, you know, maybe get a bite to eat, move around, stretch your legs. I know we've been sitting for a while, but yeah, if we want to just go down, maybe shout out your social media handles, where we can find your work, what you're working on now, so we can keep an eye on it.
Every form of social media, so Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Habtoons, at Habtoons, HABTOONS. Currently right now, I'm always like reworking things in my head, so I'm trying to figure out a way to make Epic Ethel a daily webcomic. That's a lot of work to keep up with, but I'm gonna try to do that. I actually have another series too called Witches of Grandkind, which is about these two witch sisters that live in this small town. It's kind of like akin to a Powerpuff Girls type of thing, where there's like this evil witch that lives up the mountain who's ugly and she wants to steal their beauty, and like they try to stop her from stealing their beauty and also protecting the town as well. So it's like a little fun, like family friendly type of thing. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and my handle is YEAH, it's chill, and it's that on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, also it's chill.com, or Christine-Rye.com. ChristineRye.com is taken. And yeah, you can find all of my work there. And right now I'm working on a book proposal, and it's going to be a graphic memoir based on my character and like my time in college, and it's due in 2 weeks, so wish me luck.
Can you repeat the Instagram?
Yeah, YEAH.
Okay.
It's chill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Make sure y'all follow that.
Respect the hustle.
So you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Kaylin, DrCalyn, and you can also find all of my comics on dillcomics.com, so DILLcomics.com. Currently I'm working on 3 essays that are overdue, and I also have projects that are going on with my school, but the most recent thing I'm doing is I'm launching the Plat merch right here, as you can see, so that's my exciting project right now.
Awesome. Time to open it up to the audience if anyone would like to engage. Oh, y'all gonna ask some questions.
I do, actually. I was jotting down the notes. But I think part of the sticker reason of like, checking off the boxes, it has to do with they see that these characters work, so they see like, Spider-Man works. Since there was like a rumor that, like the black Spider-Man was going to be like gay.
Miles Morales.
Yeah, exactly. He was supposed to be like gay, and like, he's supposed to have this whole like tacked onto it because Spider-Man works. So they're like, okay, we're not going to go and make a whole other character, because if we do that, we don't know if their sales are going to go up, which is ironic if their sales are down. But like, we don't know if their sales are going to be there. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if people are going to like this character. People probably aren't, because we don't know. So I feel like that's probably part of the problem, because they're fearful of like what's going to happen. And then adding on to that, same thing in shows where She-Ra, 6 seasons in, now he's finally gay and he has a husband. It's like there's that pushback at the start where it's like, well, we don't know if the creators want me to probably hear from them, but if there are creators who often want to do something that's they want to take that step and be progressive, like Rebecca Sugar and Steven Universe, but they have to wait for it. They have to keep pushing it and pushing it. Like Rebecca Sugar was a little bit more fortunate because she was able to make this whole universe around these lesbian space rocks, is what people like to call them. But then leading up to that kiss, that another spoiler, sorry.
I'm just catching up. I'm behind. I know.
Even she was saying how that took a long time for it to get to that point. So I think it's part of the problem, like the pushback and like the worry and fear. Some people stuck in their ways, conservative people and things like that.
That's true.
Not saying that's good, but
yeah, no, I totally,
Yeah.
I get that because, you spent your time building up this empire, for lack of a better word, that makes you money and that works. And it has all its moving parts and you don't have to do anything but watch it, and to have, I'm gonna say nigga because I'm a nigga. But to have niggas to be like, I want to participate because I don't see anything that looks like me in there, and to kind of attack you because you are operating in a system that didn't allow for us anyway. I think is fair, everyone, we're all in our places of, wokeness. So I don't expect for a corporation to be on my side, but I do expect for you guys to hear me out.
Okay, but have you guys seen Princess Tiana?
I
They brought in a team of black people at Disney to consult.
Well, it was just Anika
Yeah.
Noni Rose. She came. She went in to talk about it.
They had to bring somebody in there.
Yeah.
They had to bring a black person into Disney to talk about the fact that they didn't know how to design a black person.
Well, the thing is, I feel like the caveat to that is going from 2D to 3D. They probably couldn't figure out. Because even if you look at, I'm not making an excuse. Yeah, Wreck-It Ralph too.
With
Yeah.
her hair and
No, well, it's not just the hair; it's they also lighten the skin,
Yeah.
and it's
And they
the
changed her-
specific, the specific hair texture though, where she
It
goes
was
from
ugly.
like a 4C to a 3B.
Yep.
I feel like it's very specific. There's no other way. There's no other way that was not intentional. At least I think. Just when you're a black woman, you know those hair dynamics.
I don't think it was that intentional. I think they made an honest mistake because they are being progressive there. We've got Coco, we've got Moana, and they look pretty, representative of their culture. So maybe just whoever was doing that particular character at that time, switching from 2D to 3D, maybe they were like, oops, my bad.
Well, Disney's had issues before. With Moana. Well, I mean,
They get paid too much money. It goes to brands now. You
Yeah.
can make.
How many people had to fail for that to happen?
right? It's
No,
like
and
a whole
also,
thing.
no, it's clearly looking, because the thing is that when you look at Wreck-It Ralph, The Princess and the Frog did not do very well at the box office for a 2D movie. They really did not make enough money for that. But Wreck-It Ralph is supposed to be a hit, because Wreck-It Ralph 1 was whatever, it did well, but they're looking for the 2 to be a hit. And so I really feel like that this particular moment, they were like, no, she's too black. Like, this happens a lot with black female characters. People kind of dilute them. And Moana kind of had its own problem. I mean, I'm not from that culture, but just looking up a lot of stuff about it, there was its own issues. So this is, I don't know, Disney, they tend to Disneyfy things a little too much sometimes, dilute cultures and things. Disney's like a whole ordeal.
I think we can acknowledge that they're trying to make strides, and that, the only way you can achieve something is if you fail. So I get it. They're trying to make their efforts, but I just feel like there needs to be more people in the room, especially if they started in 1923. I mean, hello, 100 years, like almost. So I don't know. I feel like it's hard for corporations because we want to see what we want to see at the time we want to see it. I know I do. But I have problems with patience, and I'm working on it. So I don't know. We can be patient, but I think advocating for them as an inclusive or progressive organization would be a little on the line. But
Well, I'm not advocating for Disney. I'm just. The whole room was about to come at me. I'm like, dang. Wait. All I'm saying is that because we don't have a lot of people that look like us in a room, they will mess up from time to time. I don't think they intentionally were like, yo, let's make her nose mad narrow on purpose when they already have fat nose Coco.
No, but that's that's Pixar. Like Pixar doesn't.
Right, but isn't Pixar animated in Wreck-It Ralph?
No. That's.
Oh, my bad. Okay.
Yeah,
Alright,
no,
never
it's
mind.
okay.
All right, throw everything out.
Because
Everything I said. I get it.
Pixar tends to be more authentic than Disney in the sense that look, you know what? This is a whole conversation.
Yeah.
yeah, someone
But yeah.
told me that Disney bought Pixar?
Yeah,
Yeah,
a long
yeah,
time
yeah.
ago.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay. I was like, we talking about the same thing, right?
yeah, back when Steve Jobs was.
Right.
Yeah.
I love it.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Well, y'all know.
You had a question?
Yes, we had.
It wasn't a question. I have a lot of feelings about Disney.
Go ahead.
Right there.
Talk about it, sis.
I've been watching Disney for a long
Okay,
time. I've given them a lot of coin. We can
I always feel very conflicted about Disney films because a professor of mine that was like a very close professor for me, who wrote a lot about Disney animation, was like that every film you see, they kind of have this idea that like a great film sells things better. Like something that's good, a good product lets you sell, it sells itself, and you can sell other things from that.
Yeah.
So every movie that Disney makes is normally made to sell something. Moana was made to sell a new Hawaiian resort at Disney was making. Like every film, there's normally something partnered with it, even if you don't realize it. So capitalism is all Disney movies are like huge capitalism machines. They just realize that great art sells itself. So every movie is always going to be meticulously made, which means, and they screen it a ton. Like he wrote a lot about Zootopia and how like they redid it numerous times. They screen it to like huge amounts of their staff, outside people. So when something makes it to a trailer and then people react and they're like it's trash, it's like hundreds of people have seen it and okayed it at that point. It's like when you see an article that's trash and you get mad at the writer. It's like the editor read that, the copy editor read that, like, and all of them thought it was okay to print. So
a bunch of white guys.
Yeah.
All the classes in the frog, it was like this looks good.
So that's why I can never just like be like, well, they didn't know. It's like, as people of color, we're like taught from a very young age to empathize with white people. We like see them all the time and we're like, oh, this is such a great character, but they don't know how to empathize with us, how to draw us, how to write our voices or anything. So I just stopped like pitying. I was like, you should have known better. Like you're a company that pays people hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to draw these characters, and this dude didn't even like Google image like Instagram what 4C hair looks like to like draw like the minimum amount he didn't even do.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I feel like Disney, any company, giant capitalist machine like Disney, Marvel, the reason that they don't try harder is because they have so much money into a film that they can't even experiment. Like it's too big to fail type of, at that point, it's too big to fail. That's why they're like, they tested out Miles probably 5 or 6 years ago. They were probably doing tests to see if people would be okay with even seeing a black face on Spider-Man. So whenever I feel like there's a, animated or not, a company that big, we need to be critical of them. They don't deserve, I feel like they don't deserve us being like, oh no, they didn't know. It's like, no, you should have known. Like, you make so much money, you should have known. Like, I don't know, I just can't believe them. But I still love Disney movies because they know how to make great films.
Yeah, and it's like it's so hard because like looking at all of the corporations and like realizing like every day on LinkedIn it's always like, oh, there's a new VP of diversity and inclusion. There's a new VP of diversity and inclusion. Like what the fuck? Like how many times do I have to see that? Like just hire more people that look like me or other people. Like there are people out there.
Brands aren't
so
people.
hard.
That's the one, that I try to remind myself that every day. Like, with the Nike ad, it's like, a brand is not a person. So they don't have to be good. They don't have, brands don't have morals. They don't have to, like, brands can't be activists. Brands can't, like, fight for my rights. Like, brands want to sell me something. Brands want, even if the thing they're trying to sell me I want, or even if the thing they're trying to sell me I need, their job is to sell me something. And so they're going to try to align with my values. So it's very hard. Even if they perfectly align with like Black Girl Magic values out the ass, it's like I still know like that's your job. Your job is to figure out what I want and sell it to me. So it's hard to take, like we were talking about this at my job a lot, and it was just like the Nike ad, like it's such great, like I work at a documentary place, so everyone's like, but it's great, like it's wonderful, it gives you all the feels and ethos and all this other stuff. But it's like, but it's Nike and they rebranded themselves so we could forget that they made little kids and to make their shoes. Like so like, and they did a really good job at it, like we all forgot.
We forgot.
We all forgot.
Because I'm like,
Awesome shoes. Oh yeah, like we forgot. And that happened when we were like in high school and middle school. Like,
I
look different from the base like white person, which we're taught to think that they're the everyman. They're like the template for every person. But there's a question of sustainability, and I think that they are very impatient with the turnaround and the revenue that's generated for it. I've seen a lot of comics that are really, really awesome that only get 6 issues because they don't immediately take off, but then also they're not given the exposure and the backing and the booths at Comic-Con and the advertisements that a lot of other series are given. So they're never really given a chance in the first place. And then they expect them to just sail and be amazing and great revenue drivers, and when they're not, they're like, oh, well, it didn't work, so diversity doesn't work. When it's, they're hamstringing it to begin with, and it's kind of just really frustrating, because that impatience it's not helpful.
That's how they kind of keep that machine going. It's like they undersell the independent stuff, and they make you feel like you need to keep watching Superman when you could be reading Saga or Wicked and Divine or anything from Image, anything from Oni Press.
Oh wow!
I really like this shirt. It only gave me nightmares when I was a kid, but they go to dog hell, please.
I'm always thinking easy street. I have a question for the panel, like kind of running in this discussion. I feel like a lot of times, I mean, obviously, there's a burden of responsibility, like higher moral responsibility on POC artists, I think, a lot of times, which I don't necessarily, it's obviously a burden, but I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. And so when you're writing a character that extends beyond your experience, what is your process for self-editing and reining in and like retaining awareness of how you're portraying something you may not have complete insight to, and like just how do you go about that? Because I do think it is important that you still are keeping in mind that like this, even if I want to have a broad spectrum of representation, and there's a lot of things that I personally can represent, if I'm going a little beyond my means or my experience, how do I do that in an equitable way?
That's a super good question, because the character data that I have is really big, and I'm not. So I don't occupy that type of space, and the only way that you seem to be able to tell is through people around you, just like knowing people, and also especially more of a reader response thing. Because somebody's going to tell you, hey, that's not the reality of it, and I think a lot of it has to do with paying attention to your readers.
Yeah, all of the characters that I create are based on people that I know. So and are also just like based on my own experience, because I never want to speak for someone else, because it's like not my lane to speak for someone else. So when I do include stories that are like beyond my own experience, I would just like ask the person that the comic is based on, like, hey, is this okay? Is this accurate? Like, would you say this thing? But in the work that I do center my own character just to like make sure that I'm only speaking for myself, because I never want to speak for anyone else. So yeah, that's kind of like the scope of my work right now. I'm just kind of like speaking for myself, and anyone else, I just ask them. So yeah.
I'm echoing your sentiment, because all my main characters right now are women, and I'm clearly not a woman. So I have to keep in mind like the do's and don'ts. Like even though I'm black, I don't know the black woman's experience firsthand. So a lot of the topics or things I cover are usually pretty broad, but if it gets to a point where I want to have some sort of specific thing to tell, then I'm going to refer to my friends or a family member or listen to their stories, because there are a lot of things from that source material that I feel aren't necessarily represented well in the culture and subculture of comics and web comics and print. So it's definitely just going to the source as much as possible so you don't like mess up or do something stupid.
Yeah, really seconding that, because there's that this one article or journal article written by Linda Alcoff, who's talking about the difference between speaking for, with, and about. And it's really important to be speaking with people. So you can represent people, but you can't speak for them, and you can't just speak about them. It has to be a conversation. There has to be a dialogue.
What was the name again?
Linda Alcoff, speaking for others. I think that's the title. I can't remember the title.
Did we have anything else? Did that answer your question?
No.
Collapsed inside. We can keep Okay, so that's done. I have a question that's just very random, and we talked about it earlier. I really want to talk about Steven Universe and Adventure Time. I want to talk about these two because they kind of center like these boys as their main character are boys, but they're very like sensitive and they're. Is Steven white?
I thought he was Hispanic at
I
first,
thought he was Hispanic too.
but a lot of people claim
He's racially. He's got like a little tint to him, but
And he has
a little
yeah,
tint.
he's got like a little. And his
Young
hair,
white
I'm
boys
like,
will
I
identify
think,
with
but I think maybe he might be Jewish.
Say that again.
Young white boys will identify with him, and I think
Right?
that's
The
the
point.
main point.
Okay, yeah, okay, so I'm gonna say he's
But isn't he based off of Rebecca Sugar's brother?
That's what I heard.
Yeah, he's based off of her brother. So.
She's an alien.
All them things, they are white. Rose,
No.
except for wait. All right, wait. So I watched this like 2-hour long like video dissertation of this entire series because I don't really personally care for Steven Universe, especially not Rebecca Sugar, because she has a character in her book, her art book, that is blackface. It was a character called Concrete. And it had big old lips and those white eyes. So I'm like, sorry, Rebecca. But yeah, so Garnet,
I have to know.
He's pretty bad.
Garnet is coded as black, and Amethyst is coded as Hispanic black. But most of the other characters are usually white or like very ambiguous to the point where you assume they're white. And the video that I watched was covering how Rebecca is going back to that thing of like writing for people and writing things for people and not knowing the source material. She writes a lot of characters that are based around abuse, and these characters who are abused end up becoming like these abusers. There's this one character, the one that has the water wings, Lapis, who ends up becoming like this really crazy person against the person that was abusing her, and it's like, that's really strange. That's not how you resolve that story. So like that's the problem I have with Steven Universe, and also like the black characters. There's another one. It's like she's really big. She has the dreads. And like all these characters have these arcs that are either not resolved well, they're very short, or they result or put them away for like random topics. So like Garnet was always used for discussions on fusion and nothing else after that. After a certain point, when they started introducing a lot of fusions into the show, there's no opportunity to kind of just represent blackness in a proper way. And it's just like really strange to me. Like even the fusions, let's talk about that for a second. The fusion with Amethyst and Garnet becomes Sugalite. Sugalite is what? A giant rampaging black woman. When Pearl fuses with somebody, she becomes this elegant, graceful angel. So I don't really rock with Steven like that.
Because she was a dancer. Is she not a ballet dancer? She's a ballet dancer. I just assumed that was.
It's too
And
graceful.
okay, so let's talk about it.
That makes sense once you know the problematic like history with.
Because you are literally pulling my wig right now on camera. Like,
Wait,
I was in love with the series, and then he said that, and I was like, wait a minute, Rebecca Sugar is racist.
like is this established?
that's what I'm trying to
There's
figure out.
definitely a blackface character that
Yeah,
was
in her
the
art book,
and
there's like a
it's
little.
pretty bad.
Yeah.
It's
I did look up concrete looks.
just to name the black character Concrete is problematic
Oh,
itself.
guess what? Concrete also cannot read. That was like
Oh,
one of,
yeah,
that was one of
that
her
was the big
features.
point.
It was like she can't read, haha, lol.
Yeah, how
gem. Like, it's not even a mineral. Like, why?
It's
It's
not.
not even a mineral.
But I think that's part of the point too. Because I mean, like the gems are like the gems. You know what I mean? Like they're all made for a specific purpose. But like concrete, it's a conglomerate of like rocks and minerals, and like not really treated as something that like can you even read or even actually do like a
A
basic
basic value.
function. Yeah, it's so interesting. I didn't.
Damn.
Yeah.
Sorry to brush y'all. folks.
No,
I mean, it's two sides of the same coin. You know?
I mean, if anything, that goes to show me that we got some work to do. But also, I mean, it's interesting because I've always watched Steven Universe and I've always praised Steven Universe for its sexual orientation, representation on sexual orientation, and the way they portray family in that universe, because it's like a very village. It takes a village to raise a kid, and like you have this like very cute kid, but also like doesn't know who his mom is, like trying to figure out things. Like, so I appreciated it for its representation for like LGBTQAI plus characters. But damn, I didn't even think about race, and that makes me feel away. But this is a panel discussion. We got experts, obviously, on the panel, talking and sharing opinions. Let's talk about Adventure Time now. Has anyone seen Adventure Time? Okay, can we talk about that? Because I feel like it's real trippy.
They did drugs.
They did drugs.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm not shaming.
No.
Were we talking about the first 2 seasons, or are we talking about post Pendleton Ward?
We can talk about.
Have you seen the finale?
No.
That shit was crazy. Can I curse on here? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you did.
That shit was crazy.
Don't spoil anything.
I'm not gonna spoil nothing, but it was like, yo,
I was like,
what y'all
"Do not
doing?
say that." That's interesting.
Alright.
Okay.
Crazy in a good way?
Yeah, like.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, this is also coming from. So to understand me, I don't really care for the new generation of cartoons for very specific reasons. Not because like, oh, they're blah.
I'm an old head.
Yeah. So like my thing against Steven Universe is because Rebecca Sugar writes characters really strangely. With Adventure Time, it's just like that similar aspect. So for me, I haven't watched the series for the entirety to really appreciate it. So I would just say everybody go watch it and have your own opinions on it. I thought it was interesting, but it was just like really bizarre.
Oh yeah, you need to watch all the series.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it wasn't bizarre in the fact where it's just like I don't know what's going on and it's bizarre, but it was just like, why y'all doing this? Right? Like, what is this?
Okay,
What is
so
happening?
I gotta watch the last season.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna praise Adventure Time because I also feel that it shows masculinity in a way that I have not experienced. Just because, and I bring up Steven's Universe for that same reason, because you see these characters, men are usually the default because patriarchy, but you have these characters who are soft, who are exploring their femininity in a way that that I can relate to, because we're talking about hair, we're talking about how we interact with the world, how we portray our emotions, how we show those things. Those are things that I like to see because those are things that are easily communicable to children. You know what I mean? And I guess I just, okay, so I'm figuring some things out, but sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm messing you up.
No, because now I'm really trying to analyze the cartoons that I watch, because I was like, y'all need to go watch Steven Universe. And now I'm like, wait a second, don't watch it just yet. I need to go back and just, refresh my memory. But, right, so now I'm just like, I'm literally trying to like adjust my wig and talk at the same time. And I don't know, so those are the things, the way they interact with other characters is like how I was analyzing those shows, but maybe I need to be going back and analyzing how those characters are written, and like the language that they're speaking when they're on the TV.
I mean, I really like Adventure Time. I feel like it's just it has so much genuineness to it. I don't see them as trying to push anything at all.
Yeah.
And one thing though, I don't watch Steven Universe, but I do know that between Steven and Finn, that they don't have parental figures that are raising them, and I think that actually is kind of what creates, not in like a Disney hates parents kind of way, but in a sort of they didn't really grow up in a conventional household or in like a nuclear family and stuff.
Yeah. It's like this break from the norm, and then like all the other crazy shit. Like it's already kind of strange because this nigga lives in a tree with a dog that speaks. But right, like, and they just going and slaying just everything. Like it's fun, and I get that. Like that's strange, and that's like the quirkiness about it. But there's also like fundamental things that are happening that don't exist in our world that I would like to replicate. As I'm not saying we need to have little kids running around with no parents, but like, you know, men that are soft and that can say like, you hurt me for this reason because X, Y, and Z. And I can communicate that to you because I am emotionally intelligent and I am a person. And I feel like that hasn't been my experience with cartoons and comics, especially when they have a male protagonist. It's just like, let's go fuck some shit up and we're gonna do this, and now I'm in love with the girl and now the story is over. Like, oh, that's not enough for me, first of all. And maybe you don't like girls, maybe you like someone else. So it's just interesting to talk these out loud, and that's why we have these, because we talking.
I think a show that definitely can incorporate all those things you said in a really organic way. The Legend of Korra, which was the sequel to the original Avatar series. Say what?
Yeah, Korra.
Yeah, Korra had elements where you had characters that were soft but still strong, like Bolin. You had the strong female lead, Korra. You had the parental figures who were at first like resistant to change, but grew it to be more open. Like I can't remember his name now. What's Aang's son name? Tenzin. Yeah. So you have all these things coming up, and I think the way it's written, you really get a feel for the characters as they organically grow, because they feel like real people. They feel like people that are represented now. Like even near the end of the series, wait, sorry, I shouldn't probably spoil it.
I feel like I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Can we translate it into themes?
Okay, so let me
Let's
put
translate
this
it
way.
into
Yeah,
themes.
so near
Not
the end of the
specific.
series, there's a theme that they do, which I feel they did it way better than Voltron, is where there are a certain couple of characters who get into a relationship where I feel like that was really organic, and it didn't feel like it came out of nowhere. It didn't feel like it was forced. It didn't feel like they were checking off a box. So like, definitely go check out The Legend of Korra. They definitely have great stories, and you feel for the characters. Like I've cried watching that show. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's just start. Gotta check it out. I love it. So it is 9:40. We are here till 10. We can take a couple more questions if we want. Keep engaging with current cartoons and comics that we've seen for the next, 10 or so minutes. I was going to ask a question, and now I cannot remember. I cannot remember my question.
Do you guys have any last minute remarks? Any closing statements? Advice?
What do you want us
Did you
to
smell
leave
that?
with?
I don't know.
No, I thought you guys had like some secret.
I'm gonna go first.
Secret recipe.
I still can't remember my question, so never mind.
Advice? That's always hard, because the thing is that it's so easy to be corny and be like, just do your thing. Draw and discover yourself. But like, yeah, just draw and discover yourself. I feel like also, if you have the opportunity to do something, a lot of us live in this sort of situation where you can't just do your thing, A lot of times you can't just up and do your thing because there's restraints. And I guess sort of the main thing would be able to keep some hope that someday you might be able to break out of that, and you might be able to break out of your situation and especially for people who are afraid to draw, I feel like you have to get over that fear. And it's not, no one's looking at you. You know, you can do it in your corner, and it's a shame. A lot of people are really afraid to keep doing artwork, and I feel like they should be more encouraged, especially kids who stop drawing. I find this kind of sad. So I think encouraging other people and just do whatever you want, like seriously. I feel like we put so many limits on ourselves sometimes. It's like nobody cares.
Yeah, I agree. No one cares. Like, do
Yeah.
what you want to do. And like, there are less gatekeepers. You can just like post something. If no one sees it, no one sees it. So you don't have any reason to be embarrassed. And if people see it and they like it, then that's great, you know? So I don't know. That would be my advice too. Just like do what you want. And like, even if there isn't anyone that like looks like you that's doing the thing, like, you don't really need anyone else to co-sign what you're doing, you know? Like, there are really no, like, I learned once I started getting into my art career that there are, like, really no rules to any of it. Like, everything that I thought was a rule was just, like, made up by people. Like, all of the rules were made up by people. So you could just be the person to break those rules because they're arbitrary anyway, you know? Like, there are definitely restraints, but if you, I don't know. I feel like if you want to do something, you can just find a way to do it. And a lot of the reason why people are held back is because, like, inside of ourselves, we feel like we can't do it, so we don't start. But if you start it, you'll like find the way to do the thing. So I don't know. That'd be my last remark.
You keep saying this word gatekeeper. I think that there are gatekeepers in the sense that we are the gatekeepers. We hold ourselves back.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, because I also teach kids in the arts as well, and as soon as like it'll be like the first day, Mister, I can't draw. I don't know how to draw. I'm not good at it. It's ugly. Like that's the first thing, and that kind of like leads into adulthood, and it's like I've seen anybody watch like Japanese cartoons like anime, One Punch Man. Anybody know that? Yes. So the guy who created that can't draw that well. Like he did this webcomic and it's like little doodles, like lines, like chicken scratch. And from there, because he was that confident, because he was really consistent, he got the series. It became a manga, it became an anime, and now he's making bank off of these little chicken scratch doodles. So like, it doesn't matter if you feel like you don't draw that well. If you have some content up here that you feel like needs to come out, do it. Like look at Cyanide and Happiness. That's been around for like 10 years.
Wow.
And they're just circles and squares. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have to look like Goku. It doesn't have to look like Aladdin. It doesn't have to look like any like Disney princess or whatever. As long as you feel confident, you have a message, do what you got to do. And also, this is a new thing I'm trying to preach now too. Is just like not preach. I sound like a bigot or something. It's stepping outside of your bubble. We always cast ourselves in these things of like, I can't do this. I can't or won't do this. I don't have the tools or the means or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, all it takes sometimes is just doing a little bit of research. Like, I keep telling my fellow artist friends who are black people, like, take your black ass to an art museum. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's so many, especially in New York, there's so many different venues to go to find new avenues and find new ways to create, you know, like the Frick, go there, you'll see Rembrandt. You go to the MoMA, you can see some great stuff there too. The Schomburg, another great museum, I keep mentioning that one. The new museum on the Bowery. There's so many different places, and it's like a lot of people get stuck in these little worlds where they keep doing the same thing, and then they wonder why they can't move forward or they don't have the know-how. And it's just like, just walk outside. What's that line from that Gambino song? There's a place that you can go to if you just go outside. It's a place you can get to if you just go outside. So all you do is walk out the door. Whether it's physically or on the internet, research things, type things up. How do I do this? How do I do that? And all you need is the confidence and the consistency, and you're good. So that's just my advice. Just stay true to yourself in that way. And yeah.
And for the people who don't have time though, because I do think a lot about the single mothers with 3 kids, like mom, about so much stuff that's going on at the same time that finding something for yourself is just completely secondary to everything. I feel like that's the hardest thing to give advice to, but the best thing would probably to just be like, there's hope for you to someday have something that's for you. Yeah.
I like that.
You guys, thank you so much. I'm sorry, I was just like really overwhelmed. Cartoons mean a lot to me. I love comics, I love illustrations. I came to visual art out of an injury, so it's kind of like my safe haven outside of like the art that I do every day, even though it is still very valid and very real art. But I don't know, art to me displays our mind, our imagination, like everything that we're capable of, and cartoons and the world of fantasy to me is kind of like our retreat from the physical realm and how we just interact with the daily complexities, all of the shit we have to deal with just being a person of color in America. So the world of fantasy for me gives me hope, gives me faith that, you know, we will then create something in this physical realm that will manifest and actually help us. It might be art, it might not, but imagination is the core to art. So I feel like those two, as well as social change, are extremely linked and connected that way. So I just want to say thank you guys so much for coming and being on the panel, sharing your experiences, sharing your expertise. I want to thank you guys so much for coming in the rain. Thank you so much. Look, when it's raining, I do not leave if I don't have to. So thank you so much for really stepping out and being out here today. And yeah, I don't know.
Let's give our panel a round of applause.
Please find them. Please follow their work. They're super dope. They have such amazing things going on. I hope we get to work again in the future. Yeah, I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Oh,
thanks
Thank
you.
you so
Yeah,
much
that's
for
great.
reaching out.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry. I just can't take it back. So I appreciate you guys, but I'm like deflecting a little bit. But yeah, this is the end of our event. Please come up to talk to us if you guys have anything that you want to share, anything you want me to know about. I love to promote and share art with other folks. So please, if you have art you want to share, let me know.